the podcast that brings you unfiltered discussions with nonprofit visionaries. Together we'll uncover practical solutions and inspire connections that elevate your mission. Now here's your host, Shannon Underco.
All right. Well, hello. Thank you, Emmy and Adam, for coming to join me today on the podcast from the Nonprofit Partnership. We are going to talk about all things nonprofit today, the good, bad, and the ugly.
Hey, that's our world. We love it.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, of course. So before we get started, why don't you kind of just talk about the actual work, your role at NPP?
Sure. NPP's been around since 2001. We were started as a program of the Erie Community Foundation. In 2006, we became a standalone nonprofit. Our mission basically is to build the capacity of the nonprofit sector in our region. So we do that through a variety of services, programs, really focused in on the development of the people within the sector, the staff, the board, volunteers. But we really try to meet our nonprofit members. There are 500 of them where they are. So we always encourage our members, if you have a issue or a problem or just need somebody to talk to bounce some ideas off of, give us a call. We'll try to help you with your problem or your challenge, and if we can't, we try to find somebody who can.
Sure. So you have a list of consultants as well, correct?
Oh, sure. You being one,
Yes,
but
on the list.
Yeah.
we have a wide network locally and nationally of groups, consultants, individuals that can help our nonprofits.
Well, because otherwise, that's 500 nonprofits and two of you. The math isn't mathing.
The math isn't quite mathing, and something about that's really important in this role is that we meet, like Adam said, we meet all of our members where they're at, which might mean a member who has a $5 million operating budget and a member who has a $50,000 operating budget. And so they all need different things.
Sure.
And so we try to meet everybody where they are and develop their organization where they are right now.
Sure, of course. So looking at just the Erie nonprofit market, and I know we have all sat and chatted about this individually, just kind of the challenge of the number of nonprofits versus the total funding dollars that are available in Erie County. And I'm just curious your feedback on that.
Yeah, Erie's not much different than the national scope of the nonprofit sector. There are about 1.5 million registered nonprofits in the U.S., another 300,000 or 400,000 kind of houses of worship that aren't registered but considered nonprofits. So we're almost at like 2 million nonprofits in the U.S. And so there are a lot of nonprofits that provide a lot of services. Erie really isn't any different. We have the same challenges and face the same challenges that the sector faces nationally. One issue, I think, locally is we really have one foundation, the Erie Community Foundation. Most cities the size of Erie have multiple foundations and different funding sources. Erie's limited in that way, and that forces nonprofits to be, I think, more creative in their fundraising, target maybe individuals, corporations in their fundraising efforts, whereas let's say you go to Pittsburgh and there's foundations every block down there for whatever reason. So there is an additional challenge in Erie just with kind of that traditional funding source.
Well, go ahead, Emmy, please.
There's so much room for collaboration in Erie. Is something that we see is that there is probably somebody doing already what you want to do, if that's starting a new nonprofit. And so there's just so much room for collaboration, and the funders want to see that too.
Yeah, and Adam, I love that you brought up just Erie having one foundation, but what I'm finding is even in cities that are larger, like Pittsburgh, for example, that have multiple foundations that are able to contribute, they're essentially wanting the same thing, right? They're wanting to see multiple nonprofits coming together on a project, enhancing the skill sets of themselves individually to really maximize that outreach. So I think, Emmy, to your point, Erie needs to start moving in that direction as far as identifying organizations that are like-minded, sharing similar missions, and figuring out how can we benefit the work of us individually
I don't really, it's something we talk about a lot, is I don't know why nonprofits don't. I'm not sure why we're seeing some fear in collaboration, fear in talking to the people that are doing the same thing as you. It's almost like they become so protective of their own clientele that they're not as interested in collaborating, but there's,
So I have a theory on that.
Sure, I'd love to know.
I have a theory.
Yeah.
So I think it's fear-based.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
And only because it's something that hasn't been done before, which so naturally we're all going to say it feels uncomfortable, so we're not going to try it. But I think the other piece, too, is with having such limited donor pool.
Scarcity mentality.
Yes.
Yes.
So we're all operating in fear.
Yep.
And I think it was funny, and I was telling you this before we all started recording, is that to me, Erie can't afford another nonprofit, right? And I am saying this to the leader of nonprofit world, right? And it's because of the same thing, is that we have so many established nonprofits that are all fighting for money, and there's this fear. So curious your thoughts, like somebody comes to you and says, I want to start a nonprofit. What's your feedback?
Right. We get that a lot. We have a lot of resources within our organization on our website and elsewhere about starting a nonprofit. And we only do that just because we're the capacity builder in Erie. And people assume that, if they want to start a nonprofit, we're the ones to come to. When people come to talk to us about starting a nonprofit, and I teach our webinars and our courses, we certainly start with, what do you want to accomplish, and is there a better way to do that than just start an organization? And I'm somewhat ambivalent about the number of nonprofits. It's about how we can do that good work in a better way. And so if that means fewer nonprofits, great. If that means more nonprofits, great. Whatever. But it's about that mission-focused work and making sure we do that the best we can. And so when people come to talk about starting a nonprofit, I try to run through all the things that you need to start a nonprofit, the funding that you need in the beginning and in the long term, the competition that exists, certainly all the planning and processes that are necessary. I mean, you're running a business. It just happens to be a nonprofit, but you're restricted in a number of ways. And so when folks come to us about starting a nonprofit, it's usually, is there somebody that you can work with that is whose mission is aligned with what you want to do? Is there a fiscal sponsor you can find to kind of test out your idea and see if it's viable? Is there another way than just going down the road of starting a nonprofit? That's usually kind of the last thing you want to do once you've kind of proven the concept of the nonprofit and whether it's viable or not.
Sure.
It's
Emmy,
a
I
business.
saw you light up. Yeah.
It's a business. It's a business. Just since getting this new job at the nonprofit partnership, I feel like I've had to educate even my own sphere, my own family, my own people, that nonprofits aren't all charities.
Sure.
That it's a business. And that is something that we're trying to educate about as well.
Well, and to be honest with you, I think that there's just this maybe lack of understanding of what the hoops are to go through in order to establish the nonprofit. So what you have to do before you can even start the work. And then naturally, what is the cost of the work?
Yeah.
And then where is the funding going to come from? And part of it, and as a grant writer, I always caution anyone with any new nonprofit, it takes a couple years for them to be able to demonstrate to a funder that they are in fact sustainable, that they are meeting any of the metrics that they intend to meet, that they have SMART goals that are measurable. So it's like, okay, well, what's your plan for the next couple of years? And oh, by the way, there's like a fundraiser every weekend. So that also costs money to be able to put on a fundraiser. So just curious your experience with that. As far as like, what would you tell a nonprofit they need to have financially to be able to start?
Sure.
Well, it varies, but what we make clear is there's going to be investment, and there's probably, if you're the founder or a group of founders who are interested in starting a nonprofit, it's going to probably cost you money. It's going to certainly cost you a lot of time because of the reasons that you pointed out. There is no magic funding that comes from just getting your tax-exempt status. And I think that's what people sometimes think, that if I just get that nonprofit status from the IRS, suddenly I'll be able to apply for grants and do that sort of thing and take in charitable donations. But the fact of the matter is, as you pointed out, and I use this example, is that if you're a funder and your options are between a nonprofit that's been around for 75 years or a nonprofit that's brand new, and what they're asking from you is similar in kind of purpose and scope, which one are you going to invest in? Most of us would say the 75 because they've proven that they're sustainable. They've probably proven some level of success in what they've done. And so that's your competition. So there is that funding that is required. And so the level of funding, it really depends. And some folks come into creating a nonprofit with some funder backing and that sort of thing, but most don't. And we just make it clear that you're talking probably thousands of dollars of personal investment to just get it off the ground, just to get the exemption, because you're going to have to hire an attorney, you're going to have to go through the process. There's filing fees. There's a lot of things that that you might not consider in going through the process that is going to cost somebody money.
Sure.
And it's going to take a while until somebody's making money on that as well, and
Yeah.
paying a staff member. Yeah.
So not only the financial investment, let's chat a little bit about the actual time investment. And I'm going to ask you this just because I've had some run-ins with folks that they want to start a nonprofit and they want to do it part-time. Thoughts?
It's a business.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to start a business, are you going to start a business part-time? Maybe there's a quiet phase of starting your nonprofit for a few years, getting that leverage, getting that bankroll started, getting a board of directors together. Maybe you still have a full-time job, a part-time job to sort of sustain that. Mm-hmm. And then you got to run your business.
Right. Starting a business or a nonprofit part-time, you can do it, but it's just going to extend everything well into the future, and that's again why we advocate that folks, if you want to work in that field, go find a nonprofit that does it, that has a mission complementary to what you want to do. Pitch your program or idea to them. Maybe they'll employ you. If you want to go the fiscal sponsor, so fiscal sponsorship is where an existing nonprofit says basically you can come under our umbrella, use our tax status, become a program of ours, still maintain some independence, but you don't have to worry about building a business. Mm-hmm. All you have to worry about is doing the programmatic work. Regardless of the path, it's a significant investment of time, and that's my counsel when I talk to folks interested in starting a nonprofit is what you'll find if you just go down the path of basically starting a business that is nonprofit and go through all the hurdles and hoops of doing that, you're not going to anytime soon get to the point of doing the work that you want to do.
Right.
So, and eventually you'll probably burn out on the business side of things and without getting to the good work that you wanted to start the organization to do to begin with. So it's figure out the path of least resistance that allows you to do the good work you want to do. And then down the road, if it makes sense to start a business to support that or a nonprofit to support that, go ahead and do that.
So Adam, walk me through that a little bit, because you had said that it takes a while to start doing the work that you actually want to do. What do you mean by that?
Well, just to start, you have to develop a business plan, a fundraising plan. You have to write bylaws. You have to engage a board of directors. You have to file at the state level. You have to file your exempt application at the federal level. If you become exempt, then you have to actually implement that business plan. So you have to have policies and procedures and processes for financial management, donor or funding management, marketing communications, all those things that you have to have in place that really, it's not, so if I want to start a nonprofit to tutor kids in the inner city, so far I've done none of that.
Sure.
And I'm probably a year and a half into the process. And so you have to do all those things that are required to run a business. You know, I'm a executive director of a nonprofit. I spend a good chunk of my time just on the business part of running a nonprofit, not even on the part of the mission aspect. And that's just the nature of it.
And a lot of people who want to start a nonprofit, from my experience, are very passionate people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're very passionate about a cause. You care so much about animals that you want to put this work in to care about animals.
Sure.
But those passionate founders don't always understand, like Adam was just describing, the amount of administrative business work that has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they might not get to do the fun part of it. As a
Sure.
founder, you might not get to do the caring for animals or the teaching inner city schools or whatever you want to do until the business is set. And exactly to his point, if you're very passionate about that, but maybe you're not so passionate about being a business owner and being a business runner, then you find a fiscal sponsor or a partner or someone to collaborate with, and then you get to focus on the mission that you care so much about.
Sure, sure. So talking about kind of transitioning from starting a nonprofit to the existing nonprofits that you're working with and educating and growing, let's talk about what that looks like. So somebody that's coming in, they're working in nonprofit, they're looking to either grow or add to their organization. How are you supporting them in that?
Well, first of all, we have such a close-knit community in Erie. I think we're really lucky to have the nonprofit partnership, which I've been familiar with long before I worked here as well. And we really have a community of people who are wanting to grow and learn together. And Adam mentioned this earlier, though, there's only a finite amount of people that work in the nonprofits in Erie. And so they move around to
Sure.
all different nonprofits. And so there are a lot of people who Adam particularly has seen grow up in the nonprofit sphere as well. And that's really cool to see people moving to different jobs and collaborating and moving around and seeing where they're off to.
Right. And what we provide, again, we can't kind of emphasize the diversity of the sector. So we'll have, while a lot of our nonprofits are small, just like nationally, almost 90% of nonprofits have budgets under $500,000. A lot of our nonprofits are small, but they're very different in size and scope. So we have, again, the $50,000 budget nonprofit that just does one or two programs a year to the multi-million-dollar nonprofit that has hundreds of staff and that sort of thing. So we really have to, and it's something we have to be aware of in the provision of our programs and services, is really trying to provide all different kinds of resources for our nonprofits because they're so different. Especially not just in mission. Mission's important, but especially in size and scope and scale.
So we have programs that meet, like I said, meet any leader where they are, whether that's our governance academy or fundraising academy that are available online. We have a how to start a nonprofit webinar available online. But then we also have the capacity building side of the organization for the established nonprofits who are looking to grow, which is where our new capacity building tool is coming into play.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, sure. So we are launching next month. It's called NCAT, the Nonprofit Capacity Assessment Tool, which really is a foundational tool about everything that we've just been talking about. That if you are listening to this and you're hearing, do I have room to grow in my nonprofit, or am I more of an entry level? Our tool is going to really help people gauge what their capacity is in their organization.
So then once capacity is gauged, because you're talking 50,000 to 5 million, huge gap, right? How are we taking the $50,000 nonprofit and helping them scale over time?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and it's not 50,000 to 5 million. I mean, we have
Right.
nonprofits in our membership that have hundreds of millions. So it's a huge divergence there. But yeah, so taking the 50,000, that's a huge question. Largely, when you're talking to early stage or smaller nonprofits, if they want to scale up, some are happy at 50,000, where it's like again, maybe they just run a program or two every year, and it's all volunteer, and that's all they're going to be, and that's fine. If they want to scale up, it's really building awareness and building your fundraising capacity. That's really the only way to scale up a smaller nonprofit, and that's really where you need to focus your time. Because competing with more established nonprofits for, let's say, government grants or reimbursements, you're likely not going to do that. So it's creating more awareness about who you are, what you're doing, what you want to do, and finding the donors and others who are going to support that.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to leadership, right? So I love when I look at a newer nonprofit or a smaller nonprofit, it's almost like it's this slow burn, right? Where when you get started, you look for as many volunteer opportunities as you can to help you build and get community engagement and raise awareness, right? And then as time goes on and you build your board, which I want to talk about the importance of the board of directors of any nonprofit, right? Tell me your experience with how a nonprofit would be able to either seek or select board members within the community.
From a startup, like starting a nonprofit?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, the startup's much different than the established nonprofit. Your startup board members tend to be just a handful of people who are basically going to do the work. So they're serving as kind of board members as well as unpaid staff.
Right.
And so that's a very different person, very different mindset, maybe more entrepreneurial in nature. And they just want to get into the work. They want to do the work. And that's a smaller pool. So if you're starting a nonprofit, you have to have 3 board members legally to start a nonprofit. But in reality, you're probably talking like 5 to 7 people who are just, again, really passionate about what you want to do, have the time and money to invest in at least the near term to establish the organization, get it off the ground. So that's that's very different than, let's say, an established nonprofit who wants to recruit a competent board, and that's a whole process where you have to have a good process, internal process with the current board, probably a governance committee that oversees the recruitment, orientation, and development of the board, intentionally going out and finding people that not only are passionate about your mission, but have a skill set that aligns with your needs and have the ability to be engaged and have the time to be engaged in the process. Identifying those folks, a good process is basically like an interview process for hiring someone, getting the board bought into and agreeing to bring those people on board, and then a really strong orientation process that lets those folks know exactly what is expected, what's required, and getting them on the right path right out of the gate.
So let me ask you this, because Emmy, I know you serve on a board. Do you think, as it stands as a community now, that board members are serving in the capacity that is needed for the nonprofit?
Oh,
No.
no, not in my experience. In my personal experience, I find that people are undereducated on what it means to be a board member and undereducated on the expectations, which is neither their fault. It's mostly the leadership fault if they're not laying out the expectations for the board member that they're bringing on. And to Adam's point too, if someone's thinking about creating a board of directors, you need people who are going to be at your events volunteering and knocking on doors, and you also need people who are going to be writing checks, and they might not be the same people.
Sure.
So diversifying your group of, maybe these are 3 people who I know are going to write checks, but they're not going to be at any of my events, and they're not going to help do some of the hands-on work.
Yeah.
That's good. That's okay. You need both.
Sure.
You do need both. And like Adam said, just making sure that their expectations are really laid out in front of you. We have a board member job description that each of my board members signs every year, and it really explicitly lays out the expectations of what's expected of you, your financial contribution, your time contribution, what a good board member looks like.
So do you think from NPP's perspective that the existing nonprofits know how to actively engage these individuals?
Some. Every nonprofit's different. We don't want to kind of paint a brush of all some nonprofits do an excellent job in what I described. Excellent job in identifying the right people, recruiting them, orienting them, making sure they're engaged. Board leadership that really takes on the role of making sure those board members contribute in the way that they need to contribute. They do all the right things. And then you have nonprofits that don't, and they struggle. They struggle with recruitment. They struggle with identifying the right people. They struggle with maintaining engaged board members. And a lot of it really, it's not with a lack of people. It's not with a lack of professionals. It's not with a lack of potential board members. A lot of it's really on the process that each individual nonprofit has in their kind of board management and developing and recruiting a competent board.
So how important is the cohesiveness of a board to a nonprofit organization?
Again, everything depends on the size and the scope and the nature of the nonprofit organization, but especially when we're talking about these smaller, more startup ones, it can be make or break if you have a group of people that are supporting you. When you get to the bigger, more established, it's probably more advisory of a board, but when you are smaller and starting, and those are the hands-on people, and they are doing all of the work, likely before you have employees.
So boards, and Emmy hit the nail on the head. Every kind of life stage of a nonprofit requires often a different kind of board. Ideally, you get to a point where your organization is mature, you have multiple staff, you have a large enough budget, and the board does become kind of a governance board and an advisory as to kind of the strategic direction of the organization. And that's kind of the goal that we point folks to, even though some will maintain that kind of startup role for a number of reasons.
Yeah, but boards are dynamic. I mean, they should be fluid. They should change with the leadership changes. They should change for the needs of the organization. They should work for the leader.
So I'm going to ask you a very difficult question. Knowing that you have this kind of full scope of nonprofits in various stages, right? And you're serving all of them and meeting them where they are, which I think is beautiful. Is there one nut you can give that would be applicable to all nonprofits as to how to be successful or how to be sustainable in their work?
I'm going to say collaborate. Honestly, I'm going to say collaborate, and I think there's just so much room for partnership, and everybody needs the support. We need the community. Everyone needs, it's always surprising to us that nonprofits will come in and they both have the same mission and they don't know each other, and they serve the same type of people. There are people in our sphere in Erie right now who want to help you and who want to have coffee with you and talk about what your struggles are as a nonprofit leader or as someone who's starting an organization. So seek them out and collaborate, and we all need that right now. It's just more interaction with people in our community.
So how would you imagine facilitating that, right? So I can think of larger nonprofits that are in town and clearly have shared goals in their missions. How would you coach someone up for that to say, hey,
I think
would you as a grant writer, right? I mean, isn't that? I feel like that's also some of your expertise too. Not to flip the
but
script.
This is about you.
I know.
Not about me.
Yeah, you answer.
Yeah, I think it's that's where really board leadership comes in and kind of executive leadership comes in. And when I talk to organizations about collaboration, I always start with, why do you exist? What's your mission, and what's your purpose? And sometimes, especially with an established organization, we confuse, let's say, organization with mission. So, the organization is a tool to accomplish our mission. And I use our example. Our mission is to build the capacity of nonprofits. Mm-hmm. We just do that through the partnership. If there was a better organization to come in and do that, or if we were to be absorbed or merged with another organization in order to do that better, then we should. It's not about the partnership existing. It's about our pursuit of the mission. So always keeping that at top of mind. And that's that can be hard for people to kind of figure through because, again, when I've had those conversations with established organizations that want to at least start a conversation about collaboration or alignment or even merging, a lot of things come into the mix that don't have anything to do with them being able to better accomplish their mission. And it's all understandable. It's our staff, what happens to them, our buildings, what happens to that, our current clients, how are they going to be impacted in ways that, again, maybe aren't necessarily mission aligned. So there's some natural barriers there that are somewhat tough for organizations to walk through and get beyond. And you also have, again, the history. And if an organization, I've heard it from a number of organizations that have been around for a while, if you're a volunteer board member on that organization, are you the one that wants to basically put the nail in the coffin of the organization and merge it with another one? And again, it's human nature that people are resistant and hesitant to
100%.
that.
100%. And I think that we need to make a distinction between conceptually, when I look at collaboration, it could still be separate entities coming together on a specific project and enhancing the overall outreach of that project. So not asking, hey, shut your doors. Your clients are now being absorbed by our team. Your staff is no longer going to have a position within the company. I think that and maybe that's the fear. Maybe that's the root of the fear.
That is the root of the fear, and we see it. It's because when you talk collaboration, that's kind of the first thing you jump to.
What do we lose?
And so sometimes it's better to collaborate on things that don't mean as much. Collaborating on back office services, having shared, financial managers or HR, or even having a shared, let's say, location. You're still a separate organization. And getting to your point, when I talk to nonprofits, most collaboration does result in maintaining at least your independent identity.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to go away. And we've seen it in Erie where organizations have merged, but still are an organization and still have an identity that people can be proud of.
Mm-hmm. And to your point earlier, that's a really hard thing to do as a leader. Those can be very hard decisions to make as a leader. And so developing good leadership, and that's where our mission comes into, is we're not trying to say that that's an easy thing to do. And that takes a lot of guts from a leader to lead a team into something that might be scary or unknown.
Sure. And you had said earlier as a grant writer what my response to collaboration would be. Yeah. And I think just being totally real is that there are quite a few opportunities that are missed for funding because of lack of collaboration. So I think as much as there's this fear of either being absorbed by another entity or losing funding for your organization, we need to really lean into the fact that this is like your lifeboat here, right? Like you need to climb in, because without that, and trust me, funders want to say yes, but they can't say yes to everybody.
Yeah.
So when you can come and demonstrate, because it is an investment on their part, when you can come and demonstrate that their investment is going to meet the most amount of people in the most comprehensive way, they're going to say yes. They're going to say yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's funders are kind of thirsty, almost desperate for collaboration, and working with another nonprofit or a group of nonprofits to do something at scale that you can't do by yourself not only helps you and your mission and helps you potentially grow, but it's also very appealing to funders who want to see that kind of impact and that kind of collaboration.
So I'm hearing that collaboration is the nut that we need to take away from this morning's chat. Yes.
Well, yes.
Real creative coming from the director of partnerships, you know.
Love that.
That's what I have to say.
Love
Partner,
that.
please.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other dirty word I will say if
Adam, you're not allowed to swear on this show.
if you can edit. If collaboration isn't in your future, then really going down the path of investing heavily in fundraising is really the only way to grow as an organization. Whether it's hiring a grant writer, whether it's hiring development staff, I'll get that question pretty often from established organizations saying, how do I grow? How do I innovate and do new things and scale up? And it's just money. I'll point to some organizations around town. I'll say they invested. They invested in a fundraising staff. Now they have 3, and now they raise millions of dollars a year. And it's really not rocket science.
Sure.
It's you have to spend money to make money. It's kind of in that realm. But people, especially in Erie, are generous, and there is money in Erie. That's the other, I guess, myth that I hear often, and I think the Erie Gives that our partner at the Erie Community Foundation runs is a testament to that. Mm-hmm. The fact that a city the size of Erie can raise almost $10 million is ridiculous, and tells you that there's a lot of money in Erie. And we know there's a lot of money in Erie because we've seen successful nonprofits who have invested in fundraising tap into that wealth.
Sure. So I just want to thank you both for all that you're doing for the Erie nonprofit community. But before we part ways today, what can the Erie community do for you guys? How can we support?
Well, we don't ask for support for ourselves. It's everybody interacts on a daily basis with some nonprofit, whether you realize it or not. You do. And it's finding those nonprofits and investing in them. Again, I'm obviously big on the financial investment, investing there, volunteering, serving on a board, doing what you can to strengthen their capacity and ability. So it's, that is where we'll see the greatest success is when the community does more and more to rally around our nonprofits.
I totally agree. I was going to say offer yourself to a board. If you're listening to this and feeling like, what can I do to help? Even if you feel like I don't have a ton of money to help, a lot of people in our generation want to help their technological services or want to offer something that they don't know that a board needs, and a board needs you. So if you're listening to this, offer your help, and that's a great place to start.
Well, thank you both for your time this morning. Such a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.